10 months ago, I put down $500 of earnest money to get my first $6,000 wholesale deal. And today I have a portfolio worth $1.3 million. Damn! All from using the BRRRR method. And in this video, I'm pulling back the curtain on exactly what the BRRRR strategy is and how I used it to go from complete beginner to getting this $63,000 check. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Lili and this is where I document my real estate investing journey and bring you with me. So just a few days ago, I completed what is called a perfect BRRRR deal and got a $63,000 check. And it was one of the moments, in this journey where I'm like, man, my life has completely changed. And so I'm excited to share that with you. So in today's video, I'm gonna break down what the BRRRR method is, what a perfect BRRRR actually looks like. And then we're gonna walk through the details of my perfect BRRRR, meaning what did I buy the property for? How did I get the money to buy it and rehab it? How much did the rehab cost? We're gonna go through the rehab and I'm gonna break it down for you room by room, labors, material, as well as some of the things that people don't think about, like how much does it cost to haul off all of the trash that comes with a renovation? What type of insurance do you have to have? How much do the utilities cost, closing costs, all of that good stuff. I'm gonna break it down line by line for you guys and show you how everything culminated in a $63,000 check. And so right now I wanna make you guys a promise and hopefully you'll make me one in return. I promise that I'm gonna break this down like nobody on YouTube has ever broken it down before. And if at the end of the video you feel like I lived up to that and I kept my end of the promise, all that I ask you to do is change the color of the like button. It lets me know that you like this type of video. It lets the mighty YouTube algorithm know that you like this type of video. And so before you head out, change the color of the like button. That's all I ask. But now let's get into what the heck is the BRRRR strategy. So as you may know, BRRRR is an acronym that stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. And it's a type of investing that is meant for a buy and hold investor, meaning someone that's going to buy a property and hold it as a rental to generate passive income, versus somebody who is a house flipper who's going to buy a property, renovate it, and sell it to generate active lump sum income. Okay, so BRRRR is for the buy and hold side of things, but it's very different than the traditional buy and hold method of putting 20% down to buy a property and then renting it out to slowly make back that 20% investment in the form of monthly cash flow. Instead, the BRRRR strategy does things very differently to really supercharge your returns and supercharge your cash flow. The first step in the process is to buy a distressed property. So let's imagine you could buy a distressed property for $150,000. That may seem like a lot for whatever market you're in. That may seem like a little bit for whatever market you're in, but it's just an example property. The numbers work no matter how large they are or how small they are. So you buy a distressed property for $150,000. What does distress mean? It means that it may be super outdated. It may mean that there's some damage, that it's not in livable condition, but at the core, this property is less expensive because work needs to be done to it to get it up to the standard or the market value. These type of properties are usually not ones that you can buy with traditional financing, like going to the bank and getting an FHA loan or a conventional loan. And so you're usually gonna need one of three types of loans, either a hard money lender, a private lender, or a commercial lender. Or the fourth option is you could have the cash yourself, but I know that wasn't a realistic option for me and probably not for a lot of people out there watching, so you're gonna need some type of short-term loan. A very typical setup with a hard money lender is that they will give you 80% of the purchase price and 100% of the rehab budget. So for a $150,000 purchase, you would need to put up $30,000 or 20%, and the hard money lender would give you the rest of the money you needed for the purchase as well as 100% for the rehab. Where do you get that $30,000? If you've watched my journey, like this 8-episode series right here, you know that I started out by wholesaling to generate capital. And my average deal was somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000. So that would be about 3 months of wholesaling, one deal per month, to get the $30,000 that you would need to put down, the hard money lender giving you the rest. Now, the thing about hard money loans is that these are short-term loans, usually coming with a 6-month period, which at the end of that, you would have to pay the loan back, which means you've got to get to work on the second step of the BRRRR, which is to renovate. Remember, in the typical setup, a hard money lender gives you 80% of the purchase and 100% of the rehab. And let's say that this property needs $50,000 of work. One of the big things I'm learning through this process is how important it is that your rehab stay on time and on budget. And of course, everybody's gonna say that, but when you are the person in charge and making all of the decisions, that is really the first thing at the top of your mind. There's a certain amount of money that the hard money lender is going to give you for the rehab, and there's a time period in which they're going to want to get paid back. So the renovate portion has to stay on budget, has to stay on your timeline. But once you're done, you move on to the next step of the BRRRR, which sometimes people put rent first, sometimes people put refinance. But so that all of this makes sense, we're gonna go with refinance as the next step. So up until now, we've been doing everything the same as you might see on HGTV that a house flipper would do. So we bought the property, we renovated it, and typically a house flipper would sell it. But instead, we're going to do something called a cash out refinance. And for this, we need a little bit of a review. We bought the property for $150,000, we've rehabbed it for $50,000, and so we are all in for $200,000. And at this point, we tell the bank that we are ready to do a cash out refinance. And so they're gonna send out an appraiser to the property to see what improvements you made. They know that you bought it for $150,000, they know that you put $50,000 into it, they want to see what it's now worth. And this is one of the golden eggs or golden nuggets of real estate investing: appreciation. Although we are into the property for $200,000, we have done something called forced appreciation. We've made the property better. And so because it is so nice, freshly renovated, its market value, what somebody is willing to pay for it, is actually more than that. And that's what the appraiser is there to figure out. Let's say the appraiser goes out, they see the granite countertops you put in, they see the nice appliances, whatever, and they say this house is now worth $250,000. The beautiful thing about that is that the bank who you want to do the cash out refinance with will give you typically 80% of that appraised value in cash. Well, actually not cash, they'll write you a check, but you get what I'm saying. So what's $250,000, your appraised value, times that 80%? $200,000. Anybody see where I'm going with this? You're at the end of your project and the bank is willing to give you a check for $200,000. There's a few things you've got to do with that money. First, your hard money lender lent you $50,000 to complete that rehab. So you give them back their $50,000. They also lent you $120,000, 80% of your $150,000 purchase. So you give them back their $120,000. But you also put $30,000 into the deal yourself, and so you give yourself back that $30,000, right? You're all in for $200 between the purchase and the rehab, and the cash out gives you $200, and so you pay your lender off and you pay yourself back for the money you put in. That is a perfect BRRRR. At this point, you have an asset that you own worth $200,000, and you technically got it for free because you don't have any of your own money or your hard money lender's money left in the deal. But that's not where it stops. Because the bank gave you $200,000 as that cash out refinance, that $200,000 now becomes the mortgage that you have to pay back, and that's when we move on to the next step of the BRRRR process, rent. So now you own this property, you've paid back your lender, you've paid back yourself, and now you're going to have a monthly mortgage to pay back the bank for the $200,000 check they gave you. And $200,000 at about 4.5% is gonna put your monthly payment at about $1,300. And so, let's say this freshly renovated property, you can rent it out for $1,800. That puts your monthly cash flow, your monthly passive income, at about $500, of course, before you account for things like vacancies and repairs. But the great thing about the BRRRR strategy is that the house is freshly renovated. And so for one, it's not gonna be very hard to rent out because who doesn't wanna live in a freshly renovated house? And for two, there's not gonna be a lot of repairs because everything you put into it is new. And when you go to calculate your return on something like cash flow and passive income, generally what you do is take the amount of money that you make in a year and divide it by the amount of money you have into the deal. So let's think about two scenarios here. Remember how I said the BRRRR strategy is very different from the traditional buy and hold by putting 20% down. If you had put 20% down to purchase this property, it would have been the same $30,000 that you put into the deal. But when you do that, put that 20% or $30,000 in, you're gonna slowly make that back over time through your cash flow. But with the BRRRR, you put that $30,000 in, but you're able to pay yourself back for it just a few months later when you refinanced after your renovation. So how does that change the type of return you get? With the traditional method, let's say you still make $500 a month, which is $6,000 a year, you would take that and divide it by the $30,000 you put into the property. To keep things simple, let's assume that with the traditional method, you're still gonna make $500 a month. But if you didn't renovate the property, right, you just put in that $30,000, it might be hard to get the same level of rent as if you had completely renovated the property. But to keep things even, we're gonna go ahead and say you can still make $500 of cash flow. That would be $6,000 a year, and you divide it by the amount of money that you have in the deal, which is the $30,000 you put up as a down payment. 6,000 divided by 30,000 is gonna be 0.2. Multiply that by 100 to turn it into a percentage, and you have a 20% return. Nothing to laugh at. Like 20% return, awesome all day long. Stock market does like 7, 20%, great. But with the BRRRR method, you make $500 a month, $6,000 a year. You divide it by the amount of money you have left into the deal, which is nothing. Whether or not you enjoyed algebra in middle or high school, you probably remember that you can't divide by 0. All of the money that you put into the deal, you were able to take back out. And so that $6,000 that you make a year divided by 0, you can't do that. It's an infinite return. And here's what infinite return means to me. In the first case, I put down $30,000 to get this property, and I'm gonna make $6,000 back a year. I'm slowly gonna recoup my investment. And at that point, it's gonna take me 5 years making $6,000 per year to make my money back. And in year 6, I'll have made $36,000 and continue to gain from there. But in the BRRRR method, I've made my $30,000 back with my cash out refinance. And so I actually start making profit in year 1. That's $6,000 pure profit, $12,000 per pure profit. It's not gonna take me 5 years to recoup my initial investment. And to top it all off of why the BRRRR method is so powerful is that last R, repeat. I just paid my hard money lender back with interest in just a couple of months, and so I can go back to them and say, hey, let's do this again. They're in the game of lending money, you're in the game of renovating properties. It's a perfect marriage for them to continue to loan to you, and that $30,000 that you made from just a couple of wholesale deals or that you saved up, it's not stuck in the property. You got it back, and so you can put it into the renovation of the next one. So a question you might be asking is, Lili, what about interest? What about closing costs and all of that stuff? Because I made this example really nice round numbers for you. So what we're gonna do is walk through the exact numbers of my latest BRRRR deal, the perfect BRRRR that got me that $63,000 check. So I got this deal a few months ago when an agent who I had wholesaled some on-market deals with texted me and said she knew of an owner who wanted to sell some of his properties, but they were in pretty bad shape, and so she didn't want to put them on the market. Would I come see them? Of course, I said yes, and I was actually filming a day in the life vlog that day. The house was in a great area of town, but it was in pretty bad shape. You could tell it hadn't been lived in for at least a decade. Later on, once we started the job, we found that the furnace had actually never been used and was 8 years old. And so nobody had lived in the house for at least that long. It was halfway through the renovation, but the contractor that the seller had hired had just kind of taken some of his money and dipped out halfway through the job. We ended up finding out that he didn't do a great job, so a lot of things that he did, we had to undo before we could actually get to work on doing them correctly. But all in all, it was a really, really good deal, and I ended up offering the seller $90,000, and he accepted. Actually, it wasn't that simple.
I'd like you to pay her the commission, and we got a deal.
90K?
Yeah, 9K, and you pay her the commission.
What do you want, 4.5%?
That's fine.
I'll pay her 4.5%. We'll pay our own closing costs, 90K cash, leave all the materials, we'll take it as is.
You got a deal.
Ooh.
Is that better?
Yep.
I'm a car dealer, so I know how to deal.
He thought $90,000 was a little bit low, but one negotiating tip that we worked in was that I would pay the real estate agent's commission. Typically, the seller pays the commission, but in real estate, everything is negotiable. And so I agreed to pay the real estate agent a commission of $4,000. And the seller was really trying to get up into the $100,000 range with his counter offer. And so for me, this was a win because I'm technically paying $94,000 for the property, which is still lower than his $100,000 counter offer, but it makes him feel like I gave in to something because I said, yes, I'll pay the agent's commission. Just something to think about as you start negotiating deals. Now, I didn't have enough money from wholesaling to do the $90,000 purchase and to do all of the renovation that this property was going to need. But at this point in my wholesaling career, I had met a millionaire who was doing some private lending, but we came to an agreement that he would lend me $90,000 for the purchase and I would fund the rehab myself. There are a lot of different agreements you can have when you're borrowing money from someone. It might be the 80% purchase, 100% rehab with a hard money lender. It might be all the purchase, none of the rehab, or none of the purchase, all of the rehab. It just depends on what you and the person lending the money agree to. And if you want to see a deep dive on all of the different lending options that I have used and how the returns differ, how all the numbers work out, I will link this video in the description for you to watch next. So now that I had the money for the buy, we're on to the second step of the process, which was to renovate. And man, this was a tough renovation. If I had known how tough it was going to be when I was going into it, I might have felt a little bit intimidated because I'm like, man, this is one of my, only my second or third BRRRR deal. I don't know exactly how to deal with this. But something my mom always says, like, when you're thrown into the fire, you gonna get ready. And that's what happened. The property had been vacant for so long that the backyard was 100% overgrown. There's a detached garage apartment in the backyard, but you could barely even get to it, let alone see it, because of how long the backyard had been overgrown. Of course, the utilities weren't on because it's been vacant for so long, and so we weren't able to do the type of due diligence that we would have done if we could have tested the sewer lines and the electrical service and all of that good stuff. But I felt like I'd gotten it for such a good price that it was worth taking on the job. So here's how the rehab went. Dollar by dollar. Let's start off with the exterior, and first, the backyard. Not only was it so overgrown, but this was the best place to start with the rehab because we couldn't fix anything on the roofs or on the siding because it was so hard to get to the back of the house, and there were so many animals living back there and so many bugs that it was attracting that this was the first order of business for the renovation, and it cost me $1,500 to have a landscaping crew come through and just completely clear out everything and haul it off. $1,500 well spent. Also, don't forget, I'm gonna be including some of those rarely thought about expenses like the interest payment, utilities, holding fees, all that good stuff at the end of the breakdown, so don't leave before that. And I'm gonna do my best to break it down between labor and materials when I did have to pay for those things separately. So once the backyard was cleared, it was time to work on the exterior of both the main house and the detached garage, which we were going to turn into a studio apartment. For that studio, we needed new siding and a new roof, and so the materials for the siding cost $1,214.77. The materials for the roofing cost $568.93, and the labor to have someone come out, tear off the old siding and roofing and put on new cost $4,000. For the main house, the previous owner had actually just put on a new roof, and so we didn't have to put a roof on there, but we did need to do all new vinyl siding, and that cost $8,750, a combination of the labor and the materials. That was just an all package in one deal. We also needed a new AC condenser for the front house, as well as a mini split system, which is kind of like a wall unit that does your cooling and your heating for a very small space. And so altogether, the condenser and the mini split cost $2,575. Another thing that I didn't actually think of, but that one of my contractors recommended, was that we get a cage around the AC, like a steel cage around that condenser, because people do steal them. Like, I know in some places with like apartment buildings, they put them on the roof, but of course we couldn't put it on a roof of our house because the roof is like this, not flat. And so I had to pay another $350 to get a welder to come out and create an AC cage for me. I did get a good price on that because I had him go to a couple of my rental properties and do it all at once, so he gave me a discount on each of them. There was also an old, rusty, falling apart fence that was at this property, so we wanted to get a new privacy fence because there's such a big backyard and because the studio apartment is going to have someone living back there. And so we had to take out that old fence, but the problem was that the fence wasn't just like the fence posts poured into a little batch of concrete and then in between you have like the actual fencing. No, there was concrete poured the entire way, almost like a house foundation, and then the fence posts were put into that. So it cost me a little bit of extra money because we had to get all of that concrete ripped out, which is really hard work in the heat of the summer in the South. And so it cost me a little bit more there. The labor to get the fencing ripped out, as well as the new privacy fencing installed, cost me about $3,250, and the new privacy fence materials themselves cost me about $1,200. There was also a deck in the back that was pretty pretty beat up, thought we might have to tear it down, but instead we just replaced all of the wood that was rotten, power washed it, and stained it, and that cost $675 for labor and materials. And the person who did that also put a nice post and railing on the front porch for me as well. The last thing that we did on the exterior was pour a concrete pad around the studio apartment, both to help with water intrusion so that we weren't gonna have any foundation issues back there, and also so that the person living back there could have a nice little concrete deck to sit in and enjoy the backyard. That concrete, labor, and materials cost about $1,700. All right, moving to the interior. If you've seen this video right here or any of my TikToks or Instagram posts, you know that I had a lot of fun DIYing some of the work for the garage apartment, but there was a good portion of it that I left up to the professionals. A lot of the framing and the studs in that garage apartment were rotten, and so I did have someone come in to repair the studs and make sure that everything was structurally sound, as well as hang the hardy board, which is like a moisture resistant drywall, and do the tiling in the bathroom, so I didn't want to have any problems with mold or anything like that. So they did that work for me for $2,650. Just about everything else I did myself, and that included laying the luxury vinyl plank flooring. So the labor on that was free because I did it myself and made my friends and my parents help me, but the flooring itself cost me $1,114. We also put in a little mini kitchen, and the cabinets, the countertops, and the backsplash, although we put them in ourselves, the material for that stuff cost about $550. Between the studio apartment and the main house, we did have to make sure that the electrical and the plumbing were up to code. So for the electrical, I paid my electrician the labor separate from the materials. The materials came out to about $738, and the labor for him was $575. And for the plumber, everything was put together in labor and materials, and I paid him $3,450 to do all of the plumbing work that was needed. Moving inside the main house, the biggest cost here was the granite countertops, but I think they were 100% worth it. They cost $5,471. We also had fresh paint throughout, so it was $510 in paint itself and about $1,350 in painting labor. Some of the paint that was purchased for the main house, I did use to paint the back house myself. Continuing on to appliances, we supplied the stove as well as the dishwasher, and the tenant will be supplying their own fridge, but the stove and dishwasher cost $493. I got them from the outlet, which sells some of the ones that got dinged while they were, you know, being transported or that were overstocked. They're only open on the weekends, but that is a pro tip to get your appliances for a little bit cheaper. In the kitchen and dining room area, we put down some nice white and gray tile, and the labor for that was about $2,150, and the tile and the grout and the materials themselves were about $1,060. The wood floor that was already in the property was partially complete, and so we also had to finish that out. It costs only $405 for both the labor and the material, but the wood floor that they had already started putting down in like 90% of the property was sold out, except for one place that was like 2.5 hours away from where I live. And so I did have to drive all the way there just to get like 3 boxes of flooring. If you want to see that video of me driving out there and praying that it was still in stock, you can check out this video. I'll link it down below for you to watch next. After that, we had to get the bathrooms completely redone. The previous contractor had already put up some of the tile and drywall, but he did a horrible job, and it was going to be a moldy mess in like 6 months. And so we tore everything that he did out. I tore some of it out myself. Check out my little TikTok right here. But taking everything out and putting it back in correctly, using the right type of water resistant drywall, using the right type of hardy board, putting in the tile, the materials and the labor for that cost about $4,000 for both bathrooms. After that, we were almost done. Just had all of the light fixtures and the plumbing fixtures, like the faucets and the toilets. All of that came out to about $1,700, and the price to install those things was included in the price I gave you earlier for the plumber and the electrician. The last thing that was technically included in the rehab was that we needed new water heaters for both the front property and the studio apartment, and those cost about $500 each. So add another $1,000 to the budget, and now we were on to the hidden costs. For one, when you're doing a big renovation like this, it creates a lot of trash. And so I ended up getting a really huge dumpster for $335. And then I also had somebody come back at the very end with a dump truck to take everything else that had accumulated that couldn't fit in the dumpster they hauled that off, and that cost about $250. Then after the renovation was done, before showing the property to prospective tenants, we had to get it cleaned, and getting the front and the back thoroughly cleaned from all the construction dust and all of that cost $160. This project took about 2.5 months, and so I had to pay the utilities on the property during that time, and water and trash cost about $65. The gas bill was about $20, and the electric bill was about $63. And then we still have to talk about the loan costs, the closing costs, the interest fees, all of that good stuff. So that $90,000 loan I got from the private lender was at a 10% interest rate. And so the way that you calculate the monthly payment on that is you take that $90,000 times 10%, which equals $9,000. Yay for math. That is 10% yearly. If you took the loan for an entire year, you'd pay $9,000 in interest. But this was a 2-month loan with the option to extend to a 3-month loan. So that $90,000 was at a 10% interest rate, but that is the amount you would pay if you kept the loan for an entire year. So I take that $9,000 and divide it by 12 months in a year, which means you pay $750 per month. This was a 3-month loan with the option to extend to 4 months if I needed to. And so 750 times 3 months would be $2,250 in total interest. But although this project only took about 2.5 months, one thing I learned is that appraisers are really backed up. And so it took a while for the appraiser to get out there, for him to get the report in, and then for us to get the refinance actually done. So we just squeaked over our deadline, but that's okay, because in our contract with the private money lender, so that if we needed an extra month, we would pay $500 extra. So we paid that $500, and I paid the hard money lender a total of $2,750 for giving me the $90,000 loan. When I purchased the deal, I also had closing costs of about $2,000. Remember, I said that I paid the real estate agent's commission, so that was another $4,000. And then whenever you're doing a job like this, you can't get normal homeowners insurance. You have to get something called a builder's risk policy. And so that cost me $250 to make sure that everything was covered during the time when I had the renovation going, and now it'll just transition into a normal homeowner's policy. And so now you see how the renovation cost me about $63,300 something. These numbers aren't 100% exact because I didn't go down to the penny, but you get the idea of how much the renovation cost me. Plus I also showed you some of the closing costs and things like that, which technically aren't part of the renovation, but are still something that you have to consider because that's money that's gonna come out of your pocket. So here's how the entire BRRRR deal worked from start to finish. Bought it for $90,000, renovated it for about $60,000 before the fees and things like that. And then when we went to get the refinance, the property appraised for, please, $205,000. It's crazy to think of that the work that we put into this property made it go from being worth $90,000 and being a complete dump, not close to livable condition, to being a freshly renovated, brand new, basically, property worth $205,000. And if you remember what I said at the beginning, the bank will give you 80% of your appraised value. So 80% of $205,000 is $164,000. Out of that, I paid back my hard money lender his $90,000, which left me with about $74,000, which is how I paid myself back that $63,393.76 check. Am I right? Have I memorized that number? $63,369.76 is what I took out of that $74,000 that was left over. Now, why didn't I take the entire $74,000? There's a few reasons. One, I could have, right? I can go up to taking out 80%, but I didn't actually need to. That would have been making $11,000, right? They've been taking out about $11,000 extra than what I needed to pay back my lender and pay back myself for everything that I put in. Now, if I took out that extra money, remember, every dollar that you take out in that cash out refinance has to be paid back in the form of the mortgage. So the larger the amount that you take back, the larger your mortgage, the larger your monthly payment. But I want cash flow. I want passive income that's going to cover my living expenses. So I only took out as much as I needed, kept my monthly payment as low as possible so that I have as much passive income as possible. And that moves us on to the next step. That money that I took out in the cash out refinance means that my monthly payment for my mortgage is going to be about $1,000 on this property every month. And the front property rents out for $1,400 and the rear ADU rents out for $600, which means I have $2,000 of monthly income, $1,000 of expense for my mortgage, which means I cash flow about $1,000 per month, completely infinite return because I have nothing left in the deal, and my expenses and my vacancy are going to be very low because both of the units are completely brand new, completely renovated, and rented out to great tenants who are excited to live in such a nice place. So I think I did it, right? I pulled back the curtain on exactly how the BRRRR strategy works, both in theory and in real life. So if you agree, don't forget to change the color of the like button before you go. And if you want to go even deeper on one, how I got the funding to purchase this deal, check out this video right here, whichever side. And two, if you want to follow along in the series of all the properties that I've been BRRRRing this summer to get to a $1.3 million portfolio, check out this video right here. I can never remember what side it's on. But until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.